The Spot Track Podcast, talking sports contracts, the salary cap, and business of sports.
Welcome to the SpotTrack.com podcast. I'm Kevin Sylvester, along with Paul Peck and the founder of SpotTrack.com, Mike Giannetti, and we are going to talk some football. We're going to talk some baseball, PED suspension, but we're going to start with hockey because maybe the greatest hockey story, aside from the miracle on ice,
I'm with you on
has occurred. It is ridiculous, incredible,
and amazing.
And inspiring,
yes.
Actually, all in one.
Yes.
The Vegas Golden Knights making the Stanley Cup Finals as the Western Conference champions.
Pretty easily, too.
Yes.
I mean, really, they didn't really have too much resistance.
They only lost 3 games in 3 rounds of the playoffs.
Man, it is that is quite a spectacle. It's been fun to watch. They're a good team to watch. They're a good hockey team to watch. And the story is incredible, but in a time where we're all sitting around talking about sports gambling, to have a team, an inaugural team in Las Vegas, where everybody was kind of hemming and hawing about this, was this going to work? Where are we going from here? The biggest underdog and the most unlikely story is now real, a reality.
Yeah, at 500 to 1 odds.
Right.
If you were an early adopter of the Knights, you were like, hey, I'm a good fan. I'll throw a couple bucks on that, right?
All right, yeah, and everybody asked me, how does this happen, right? Mm-hmm. Having worked in the NHL for a team for 11 years, the Sabres, for those who don't know. Most people are in Buffalo. Listen to this, or those who are outside of Buffalo. I worked for the Sabres for 11 years in the broadcast department. And let me tell you why this was possible. Number one, you mentioned, let's talk about the easily part.
Yeah.
Number one, I thought this was a down year for the Western Conference because the top teams have played a ton of hockey. The Chicago Blackhawks, LA Kings. Those are worn-out hockey teams.
San Jose Sharks, even a little bit too.
Older teams battling with injuries, but they were like kind of one tier down for me from Chicago, LA, teams that have flip-flop years and winning the Stanley Cup championship because they have the best players. But when you throw in Olympics, you throw in World Championships, these guys have played a lot of hockey. It wears on you. The grind they go through to win the Stanley Cup. I remember Dave Anderchuk when he was at Tampa. Years later, they had a book, and we were sitting there in a morning skate in Tampa, and he shows me the book. He's like, "Oh yeah, I lost so much weight during the Cup Finals." Like pictures of IVs, guys taking after the games. It just drains you. And you think about it every other day, the skates, the energy, all that stuff that goes into it. So when you are successful, there's going to be some down years. There just has to be because of all that hockey that they play. Now, the buildup of the team, you mentioned cast-offs and such. This team is not so much a bunch of cast-offs.
I agree with you.
Unlike other expansion years, because of, Mike, your area, the cap,
right.
The salary. You look at when San Jose came in, when Ottawa came in, these weren't cap years. There wasn't a salary cap to deal with, so there wasn't any maneuvering and dealings that those expansion teams were able to do to say, okay, you know what? I won't take this guy, but you got to give me picks to take this person.
So the actual building process was a little different than in past, but from a player's perspective, mentally they still feel like they were thrown off their original team.
Correct.
They were picked off. They were the one player picked off their team. So in their mentality, the fact that they've gone to Vegas and they're starting this brand new franchise, to them, they have been cast off from where they came from.
I would agree. The other reason why they've won is, and this is no secret in hockey, is goaltending.
Yep.
And this is where
No
George
question.
McPhee was brilliant.
Yes.
The first player he got was Marc-Andre Fleury.
And in every way, Marc-Andre Fleury has won a Stanley Cup. He has performed at the highest level. He is a great guy. He is a team leader. He embraced going to Vegas. Not every player does that.
Correct.
So what makes them different as an expansion team is no other expansion team had a Stanley Cup winning goalie dropped onto their roster. And I'll give you an example of another guy, what we're talking. A guy like James Neal is only there because of the cap, because he's an unrestricted free agent, and the team that had him, Nashville, wasn't going to be able to keep him. So they took what they could get. So now you're talking about a legitimate top 2-line NHL, former, at times star player on an expansion team only for reasons of salary
But
cap.
that wasn't just, all right, I'm going to take James Neal off your hands because he's a goal scorer. You're building an expansion team. Why do I want to? You want to take some young players you can build with, right? You don't want to take guys who are going to walk away after 1 year, even though it gives you some legitimacy
It does.
in James Neal. But that's where some of the dealings occurred. But let me go back to Marc-Andre Fleury for a second, because you talked about somebody who embraced it, and guys love him. The Penguins players love Marc-Andre Fleury. He is a great locker room guy, if you will, if a goaltender can be one. And, he had concussion issues and lost his starting gig in Pittsburgh. So he's got a new start. He goes in to be the number one, and because of how he embraced it, it made the other players embrace it and help galvanize. Now let's look at some other players on the roster, right? You also have Malcolm Subban, who was the backup goaltender there, and Max Legacy also played some, and then a couple other guys played a few games. But Malcolm Subban is a highly regarded prospect when he was coming out and moved around with a couple different – this is his third team, I believe, because he was Boston, then Vancouver, and now the Golden Knights. It's P.K. Subban's younger brother, and a top prospect coming out. Goaltenders take longer. So they went out and they got two good goaltenders to begin with, and what a great start for an expansion team. Then you look at – you mentioned Neal. Then they got another guy like David Perron. Okay, David Perron was a high-end scoring forward when he was younger. Again, concussion issues. He's only 29 years old, and it's kind of a resurrection for him. He scored 16 goals on the season, but there is someone knows how to be a pro, knows how to score. William Karlsson, who led him in goals this year. This is not a cast-off here. This is a guy who was a high-round draft pick by the Anaheim Ducks. He went to Columbus, scored 19 there. It wasn't like you're getting nearly a 20-goal scorer. Like, that didn't happen the last time you had expansion teams. You got the guys who scored 2 goals in there. And then you've got other veterans who know how to play a gritty game. Derek England. I look at him. Ryan Reeves, right? You got somebody out there patrolling so nobody messes with you. Braden McNabb, who played in Buffalo. This is a big defenseman who had a lot of upside and a lot of promise and played with the Kings. Like, he learned how to play with the Kings, Lucas Pisa. I mean, the list goes on and on. Eric Haula, who was a great young prospect, 29 goals with the Minnesota Wild. So it wasn't like they got a bunch of bums.
They had other defensemen in Minnesota that they wanted to protect, so they had to make the decision to let him go.
And they made a trade at the deadline. So he didn't just sit back, right? And many speculated, they're going to go get why can't I think of his name?
Evander Kane?
Evander Kane from Buffalo. Because Evander Kane was in Vegas flashing cash once during a lockout. We thought, all right, Evander Kane. Listen, George McPhee is smart, and, Evander Kane, you're bringing a personality into the locker room. You can't bring him into that locker room where he'd be the biggest personality. He got traded to San Jose where he fit right in a role and had a great playoffs, right? But it wasn't the biggest personality. He went and got Thomas Tatar. Yeah. Who, again, a talented player from Detroit, somebody they're moving on from. Great trade, because that's a player who could fit in, play anywhere up and down your lineup on the forward lines. And let me add this, Mike, they got one heck of a coach in Gallant. Anybody in hockey circles, when he was hired by Florida, great hire. When he got fired by Florida, that's a huge mistake.
Yeah, because he didn't mesh with their new way of thinking in Florida, so now all of a sudden a legitimate guy comes on the market.
So let's kind of transition right into where do we go from here, right? Because you've talked to Tatar, you talked about sort of the moves they made to sort of build it up a little bit. But a lot of these guys you just mentioned, are going to be some sort of free agent in the next 2 months. And they've given up their draft picks to make that trade.
Correct.
They've sort of forfeited maybe the next 2 years to kind of throw it all in the basket here. And obviously it's worked. Obviously they've gotten to the finish line here.
Well, I recognize they have to. There's so many windows, I think George McPhee, a longtime GM of the Capitals,
he's had some heartbreak.
Yeah, and he made a horrible deal, by the way, the Forsberg deal.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, just a bad deal. Where would the Caps are going to Game 7 as we record this with the Lightning, but it'd be over if they had Philip Forsberg.
Be a heck of a story if it's Caps Vegas, though.
It'd be great.
Yeah,
it'll be great.
Right in the storyline.
Listen, if Washington's ever going to win the Cup, this is the year. And if the Golden Knights, if an expansion team would ever win the Cup, this is the year.
Yeah.
And McPhee recognized that.
You think the Vegas factor has a lot to do with all of this sitting over this, Mike? And I don't mean the Vegas factor of the gambling, but the whole new team in a new sports market that needed to make an impact and grab the fans and make a flash. It all led to a lot of these decisions.
Sure. I mean, we've talked about the inspiration it's sort of pushed out with the league, and maybe it is a down year in the conference, but maybe they've capitalized on that. I mean, quite frankly, I mean, maybe they've kind of thrown not just cash and a big roster together to kind of capitalize on that, but they put an entire city. I mean, I've got family out there, I've got friends out there. We've seen the social media posts. This is a sort of a cult, following for this brand new team, and you're going to have that with anything new to start. But the fact that they shot up the standings, the fact that they sort of embraced the social media side of things, they threw parties, they had concerts before games in the regular season, not just the postseason.
How about their pregame ceremonies?
Yeah,
they're Vegas shows.
Exactly what they
pretty
should
cool.
be.
This is similar to Nashville, sort of embracing the culture with the hockey, and it all just came together. And look how quickly they won.
Yeah, I think it as a general manager and a front office makes personnel decisions. I think that was part of it. Like it behooved them to make decisions to be good right away. And maybe they're not so good in years 2 and 3 for the reasons that you cited, but it was more important to be good in year 1 than maybe in year 3.
There's no question. And to me, that is the difference between this expansion team and any other. Yes, the cap had a big part of that, obviously, and how it restricted their ability. But, they didn't just go out and say, we need guys that are going to be here for 7 years. And that's what most expansion franchises do. They want long-timers. They want people we can mold into our own. Well, no, we didn't need that. They brought in winners. They brought in players who, on paper and on the ice, have shown that they've got abilities in this regard. And they had a GM and a coach that were on the same page clearly, and they sort of made this thing work in 2 months. Let's be frank here.
Yes.
I mean, this is a good team by December.
I think it's a great tribute to the front office, to George McPhee, the general manager. As we so much on the Spot Track podcast talk about team building and
the process.
I think this was brilliant to be able to find the right players who could fit together. I mean, this is a team that didn't exist a year from now, and the chemistry was there, and the right pieces in the right places, and then the right coach to get the most out of them. But this is a tribute to a team building.
Well, the other thing that's impressive, and I mentioned they brought in role players too. They didn't just go for stars, like a guy like Cody Eakin, right? Center, but there's a role playing guy, third line center. If you need to move up, play second line for a little bit, he can. If he can play fourth line, he will. Like, they got guys who are willing to embrace the role. And in hockey, more so than any other sport, team chemistry matters. Sure. It matters in that locker room, and the chemistry with the fans matters, the energy in the arena. You guys remember it here in Buffalo when the team went back-to-back finals. That was a team of, all too small. And by the way, those Sabres teams that didn't make it to the Stanley Cup Finals, they were all on 1- and 2-year contracts. Right? There is magic behind that, because typically players do have great years when their contract is up. It's just amazing how that happened. So that was a good plan by McPhee to do that, because you're going to get guys playing their butt off. And there's also the major league movie factor. Hey, everybody thinks we're going to suck, guys.
That's right.
Right? That's right. I mean, we're a joke. We're an expansion team. Cast off. To go back to the start of the conversation, let's go show them something.
All right? One negative on this, because this is Vegas, and this was an expansion team, and they were 500-1 to start this year, right? From what I've read, only 20 bets were made on that 500-1.
That's it, huh?
Wow.
And the highest was a $20 bet.
So
how
why
is
is
the
everybody
team
keep
in
saying Vegas is going to get their doors cleaned here on this?
No.
Well, because there were plenty at 300 and 200-1 that came in.
Okay.
Once
Gotcha.
things started to get rolling a little bit. But you're in the city where gambling's able to happen, and you've got a brand new team, and you're not just going to throw $10 on your team.
Good point.
How are you not doing this?
I don't know.
I don't understand how hundreds of people didn't do this.
A lot of the sports books are happy people didn't do that. So
Gracious.
Yeah, what's going to be interesting when Seattle comes in.
Yeah.
The expectations in Seattle is they're going to be able to do the same thing, and many have speculated, well, there's no way the NHL are going to let them have the same rules and same setup. And, my point is, Seattle's paying like $600 million
yes, they
to
will.
get in. So you better believe they're expecting the same setup here to build a team.
Speaking of expectations, though, how about these Oakland Raiders and John Gruden coming to Vegas in a couple of years? Well, talk about some big shoes to fill.
That is the other brilliant thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they jumped the Raiders.
Yeah.
And grabbed everybody's hearts here.
It's going to be an unbelievable ceiling for that team now. And I'm not sure they're going to be in a position roster-wise where they're going to be, one of the favorites to be winning at that point, in
Right.
a year and a half or so, wherever we get there. But they've shown they can do it. That's certainly a city that can embrace a sports team. We'll see what happens when they're not winning, every other day. But
Right.
like I said, this is a high bar for sports in general. I think you're going to start hearing about baseball and basketball being talked there. There's already a AAA team baseball wise. There's the summer league for basketball is there, so they do like their minor league system in terms of Vegas. So there's a lot going on there, but I think this is just a recipe for more, really.
Well, and many thought that the fans wouldn't support it because they didn't have enough. There's a lot of service.
Hockey in the desert.
Right? Yeah, hockey in the desert.
Yeah, and a lot of people work nights there too.
Interesting.
That's part of it. Part of the demographic there.
But they give them credit. They showed up and they're doing it right. It's just an amazing story. We'll see how that one plays out. All right, we're going to move on to football here and some NFL holdouts.
Yeah.
Here.
Not technically holdouts yet.
Yeah, just whining, really.
But organized team activities have started around the NFL this week, and there's a pretty good list of Pro Bowl level players who have chosen not to show up to voluntary workworkouts.
All right, yeah. Why do we call it organized team activities?
That's what they call them.
It's so stupid. Can't we just say workouts?
Because there's different versions of the workouts.
Because there's workouts with no footballs, there's workouts with footballs, there's workouts with 11-on-11s.
Look, Fonzie.
When you can get concussions, when you can't, all those things.
That's why I was saying, look, Fonzie, get off the water skis here. We didn't jump the sharks. We haven't have specific names.
Right.
And every team's got T-shirts for every month of a workout. Like, what the hell are having to put on the Hans and Franz stuff and get in the gym and pump iron? It's called working
You're
out.
You're dating yourself,
They're
Kevin.
supposed to do that.
I don't know. When they came out with OTAs, organized team activity, I'm like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard of.
But
All right,
that
anyway.
said, there's a lot of guys who have chosen not to show up again to voluntary. But there's a message there
because they know it's dumb.
Well, but there's a message there because normally these guys do show up, but a lot of them are not happy with where their contracts are at, and it's a pretty good list of guys: Tom Brady, Rob Gronkowski, Aaron Donald, Julio Jones, Le'Veon Bell, Khalil Mack are all quote unquote holding out at the moment.
Yeah, this is sort of the fake holdout, right? Because like I said, it's a voluntary workout. There's no money loss. There's no you're not getting paid to go to these workouts. None of that exists. For some players, it is expected that you go to this workout in order to earn your workout bonus by the end of the summer. So there is some stipulation in terms of that with a few of these contracts. But it's generally the workout bonus is peanuts for these players. So it's going to be, if they're looking for millions, they're not going to worry about $25,000 in terms of how that lays out. So,
by the way, let me just add a workout bonus.
Yeah, it's pretty unbelievable.
So we have to pay you to work out so you're in shape so I could pay you $15 million.
We have to pay you so that you'll
show up.
Promise to come.
Yeah, it's not go.
We know you're going to be in shape because
we know
you're
not going to lift weights unless we pay you. It's we want you to be there, so we'll pay you. It's essentially a pay you to be there.
This is so these players not showing up to me is no different than the Bruce Smith principle when he played for Buffalo, Paul. You remember?
Oh, yeah.
When Bruce Smith practiced training camp?
Nope.
Did anybody worry about it?
Nope. They shouldn't have.
Who was it? Who was it recently? It's Favre, right? Favre didn't do any training camp ever, right? Ever. He was like one of the first quarterbacks to do nothing with his team for weeks and weeks, and it still worked out fine for him.
Yeah.
So, people have shown they can do it. I mean, we've had baseball players just this season completely miss spring training because they didn't have a contract. And they're fine. They're still hitting their, striking out 9 times and hitting a home run on the 10th at bat. So,
right.
Well, I remember there was I'm going to go and slide back to hockey. I will not name the player, but there was a player that, teams get these players in and they make them work out, and they made this player had to get to a certain body percent fat and lost his weight, leaner, and was freaking miserable, and production went down. And several teammates said they should just left him alone. He was fat, happy, and good.
Yep.
Right.
So that's becoming a little more prevalent with these contracts. Are these weight bonuses, and it's in lieu of actually showing up. You've got to come in and you've got to weigh in 8-9 times throughout the summer. I've seen it quite a lot. Generally with like a defensive lineman who kind of let it go a little bit over the winter, and they got to tighten up a little bit. But that's becoming more and more popular in terms of how these contracts are structured. But this is a tough off season in terms of how, I think we're halfway through the NFL off season. I just read that today. So we're officially almost there. And these fake workouts are sort of step one.
Yeah, they'll go through almost the end of June in most cases. So, but the bigger picture is that a Julio Jones who has 3 years left on his contract is clearly saying, I'm not happy time for me to renegotiate if you want the most of me and the best of me.
So let's go through that list real quick, because we've got Brady. We sort of know where he's coming from. This is year 2 of his 3-year contract, which means he's in need of a signing bonus. That's the Tom Brady way.
Right.
I
think he's also a little annoyed at some of the things that have gone on there, too.
Maybe, but I think that could just be a lot of speculation. People are just, he's getting the Tom Brady treatment where we've got to find something wrong because he's a perfect human being. And no, honestly, this is just how he works with contracts. He signs 3-year, 4-year deals. By 2 years, he's gotten a decent amount of money, but by year 3, his salary this year is minimal. It's lower third of quarterbacks in terms of his actual pay. So I think it's like 14.5. So, he's in need of a $30 million signing bonus like he's had 3-4 times over the last 10 years, and that's where we are. So,
I'm
he's
pretty sure he's got the Patriots by the cojones.
Yeah, it seems like it, doesn't it?
Yeah, he does.
Gronkowski's similar. Gronkowski's sort of so Gronkowski and Julio Jones are in the same camp here. Both have a few years left in their deal. Both were very well paid with the current deal. But we're into that fluff conversation. We're into that deal where they sign long-term contracts that were only substant for about half the contract, right? So Julio Jones got a 6-year deal. Only 3 of those years really meant anything in terms of cash and actual substance. So we're in year 4 of Julio Jones's deal where he's worth $10.5 million. Which is fine, but you've got guys making 16 and 17 million around him, and he's still arguably a top 5 wide receiver in the league. So it's at a point where for the last 3 years he's been paid well, and now he's not. So some will look at that and say,
guys have passed him too.
But you're going to have a lot of people look at that and say, don't sign a 6-year contract then. And that's you and your agent's fault for building in the fluff and allowing that to look better on paper when in reality you didn't really want those last 3 years, and we're getting into the conversation of the Kirk Cousins and these shorter contracts that mean, all 3-4 years means something in terms of cash flow. And that's where we've got to get to with these elite contracts because of this right here. You've got Gronkowski and Julio Jones, who in terms of their cash flow rank, outside of the top 10, in terms of Julio Jones, I think he's 12th. In terms of wide receiver pay right now, and that's why he's not happy. That's it. That's the number right there. It's 12th.
It's all about the quan.
Yes, it's all about cash flow.
Now, the couple of other guys are interesting because they're going into the last years of their contract, and arguably 2 of the most dominant defensive players in the league, and Aaron Donald and Khalil Mack, are probably not showing up because they're waiting and obviously a little annoyed that the new contract hasn't come yet.
So those 2 are falling victim to the rookie structure, and it's a tough situation to be in. They're playing out their 5th-year option. They know what's coming next. We all know it. That franchise tag is lingering for those players if there's not a deal right now. So they're in a tough spot because they really don't have any leverage right now. They were de facto to that 4-year rookie contract. This is the 5th-year option that was part of the CBA. And they know that franchise tag is coming. So for 6 years, they really have no official say other than to say, I'm not going to show up for workouts and I'm going to miss a preseason game and however far they want to go. We've seen some players go, pretty deep into the preseason with this holdout. So look in Khalil Mack's state, maybe it's a little softener because he had a little bit of a step back. He did. I mean, he had a little bit of a step back year. He wasn't as productive. He wasn't the dominating player he's been for 3 years there. So he had a little bit of a setback in 2017. You can't say anything about Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald was one of those players who missed all the workouts last year. He did this last year, and rightfully so. He's arguably the most dominating defensive player in football, J.J. Watt aside. But for his age, on the team he's on with that Rams team, I mean, he is as valuable to that team as anybody. And he's extremely underpaid right now.
He was fresh. That's why. He didn't
that's right. That's right.
Yeah, there's something to be said for that, by the way.
Speaking of what, just refresh everybody on what happens if guys, again, these are voluntary, so there's no fines here,
right.
But if they chose to miss a mandatory mini camp and then training camp and then preseason, what happens?
Right, so we've got our voluntaries now, but in mid-June, most teams start those mandatory workouts. And if you're missing days then, it's $70,000 a day. But it's to the team's discretion. So that's important, right? So if a guy like Aaron Donald holds out, I don't think anybody's going to gripe too much. And I don't think you're going to see the Rams docking him $70,000 a day to hold out on a mandatory workout in mid-June. From there, it gets a little hazier. Every training camp day you miss is $30,000, which can add up quickly because you're talking about weeks there in terms of training camps. And then once preseason starts, that's all on your pay. So if you miss a preseason game, you're gonna be docked 1/17 of your 2018 salary.
Even though the guys don't technically get paid for the preseason games, right?
Right. They look forward to the 2018 base salary, and they'll take 1/17 of every game.
Now, is that automatic, or is that still the team's discretion?
Again, all of it is team's discretion.
There you go.
We had this with Cam Chancellor, where where Seattle basically worked out a deal with Cam Chancellor, right? And then it all worked out in the end.
Here's the deal: you show up and play for the regular season, we'll waive it.
Look at there's going to be more and more of this skip the college bowl to get ready for NFL in the NFL. This is going to happen. I think.
Sure.
You're going to see guys who just don't want to work out in the summer or don't want to work out with the team.
I don't blame them.
Let's get there because there's a lot of that happening too.
I don't blame them because you know what? Players have realized, you know what? I got a month off.
Yeah.
Like I got a month to live my life in the place where I want to live it, and the rest I got to spend working out all the time. Like it's got to be like that's not the pro life.
Is it going to be geographically related?
It's interesting.
Some cases, right?
It's interesting. Yeah.
A lot of guys live in Miami. They may be more willing to show up at Dolphins camp than if they would be going to Green Bay. I mean, is that a factor?
I think guys the pressure that they face during the season, training camp in the season. And I think they're realizing, you know what, I can get myself in shape and perform. When they've proven themselves with a big money contract, I don't need to go out there and do a workout I can do at my gym here in Miami Beach.
Right. Yeah. Which is my point where, they're called workouts. All these guys are in shape. They all most of them keep themselves in good shape. It has more to do with what you said, Kevin, moving up, packing up, getting out of where they, it's guys don't come in out of shape rarely, if ever, anymore.
Hey, before we're going to shift to baseball here, but I want to mention two things. Hey, for those of you listening on iTunes, be sure to leave us a review. Make it a good one. But leave us a review on, just be honest with it, iTunes. Leave us a review there.
Love Mike and Paul. Not so sure about Kevin.
All right. Yeah. Well, that was actually my review I wrote. And then there is a Major League Baseball trade candidate article that will be up on SpotTrack.com, so be sure to look for that. But we want to close out this week's podcast talking about Robinson Cano and as you've deemed it, Mike, the unlikely PED suspension of Robinson
I was
Cano.
surprised. I don't know if I was definitely surprised. I mean, I'm not surprised if this is 2009 and he's still a Yankee because it seems like pretty much everybody in that locker room was dirty. I mean, that's where it all stems from. I mean, you've heard people kind of bat an eyelash at that situation in terms of former Yankees and guys who've been around that crew a little bit. And
the old Bash Brothers and the Yankees.
Yeah, right? Nobody's really questioning anybody from back in those days. But look it's 2018. There's been less PED suspensions. A lot less. And this guy's, got a $240 million contract. So it's not like he's, gearing up for his next big deal. He's on it. He's in the middle of his next big deal.
And he did tested positive for a masking agent.
Yep.
Is what it was.
But they did the diligence to find out that it was masking something.
Well, that's why you don't take a masking agent unless you're trying to hide something.
That's why it took 3 months for this actually to come forward. They popped them in December for the masking agent, and then they took 3 months to actually do the science on it and find out that, yes, he actually was covering something up. So it's legitimate from everything I've heard, and it makes absolutely no sense to me. And it begs the question, what isn't MLB doing to make this go away? Because if a guy making this much money is still doing steroids,
right?
What do they have to do? Because obviously, $11 million loss, which is what he's going to forfeit, isn't enough. Means nothing to him.
Wow.
Because he's still going to make
$240 million contract.
Well, he's still going to make $13 million this year because he gets paid for off days. He forfeits 80 game checks,
right?
And they get paid league days. They get paid 186 league days this year. So he's going to pop for 80 days. Out of that 186, and he'll make the $13 million. That doesn't include
just
those
for
80 days.
That's unbelievable.
And probably 50 of those games he'll be on the disabled list for with a broken hand. That's another gripe to have. We haven't had this really come up yet, but a guy who's been popped and injured, apparently those things can coexist. So that's got to change. I mean, nobody's going to argue with that.
So
that's got to go away.
30, they'll miss him. 30 games.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. So that's going to have to change. I think the CBA will take care of that coming around, but. The big really question here is, if this guy's willing to forfeit $11 million, which is what he's done, he can't go to the playoffs. That's a big deal. If Seattle, they're contending right now, and they've been contending for a few years, and he's pretty much canceled his trip to Cooperstown. I mean, those are the ramifications. That's where we are.
Right.
And quite frankly, we're not even sure on that last one yet.
No,
it seems like guys are getting closer, and by the time he's around, who knows? Maybe there's a there's a wing in Cooperstown at that point for those guys. So maybe he'll just go to that wing instead of the main wing. But look, there's something to be said here, and it's a financial conversation that needs to happen here. I think they've taken away everything baseball activity wise they can do. They've suspended him from the regular season. They've suspended him from the playoffs, and the Hall of Fame is at this point keeping him out. So baseball itself has done enough. To me, there's two conversations. One is contractual, and one is team. To me, the team does not get enough of a ramification from this. The team doesn't do enough to police this because they don't get hurt enough by this. So I don't know what that conversation is. There's a lot of smarter people who have talked about this before, but for me, the fact that Seattle let this happen and weren't doing their own due diligence on this is a problem because this is their superstar. This is a guy they're paying $250 million, and they've agreed to a guaranteed contract for that. So the fact that in the middle of this contract, this has happened is a Mariners problem as much as it's a baseball problem, as much as a Cano problem. But let's kind of switch gears to where, we kind of fall into place here, and that's the contract. The problem for me going forward is that Robinson Cano still has $120 million guaranteed from here out.
Yeah, that
untouched.
That shouldn't be, right?
Untouched, unless he's popped again, of course. But that can't happen anymore, right? And that's a union problem. That's a CBA problem. But if guys like this are still willing to risk it and still willing to do it, then something else has to happen. And for me, it's about the word guarantee. You don't have to void the contract. A lot of people have said that to me in passing in social media and things like that. I don't see them ever voiding the contract, unless maybe this is his third offense or something like that.
Yeah, because the team wouldn't want that to happen because they want to hang on to the player.
That's the problem.
Right?
Yeah, he's still an all-star. So,
right. Yeah.
So to me, it's about taking away the guarantee. And what do I mean by that? It goes to the team, right? We've got guys like Albert Pujols and Jason Hayward, players like that on terrible contracts right now because they had to sign 12-year contracts back in the day when that was happening. And they're going to be 42 years old and barely able to walk to first base, but worth $25 million a year still. So, if there's a way to get around that and ensure guys aren't going to cheat while on those contracts, because look at a guy like Pujols, you could see him using some sort of masking agent right now because he's broken down. He can't recover. He's injured all the time. You would understand a guy like that trying to revive his career. Rafael Palmeiro, that's the perfect example. He did it. He was 40-something years old and tried to revive his career with a PED, even though he lied in Congress in front of Congress about it. But look at here's what needs to happen, in my opinion. A guy like Cano, he's made $170 million already. He's got $120 million left. If at this point, because he's been popped and officially found, guilty of this, if they took away the guarantees, now when he's 38 years old and he can't play for anything, his last 6 years are no longer guaranteed. So Seattle can basically say, all right, we're done with you. We're gonna void out of this last 3 years. What is that? It's going to do? It's going to shorten our contracts, which is what we want anyway. I don't want Bryce Harper signing a 15-year contract anywhere. I don't care where it is. We need shorter contracts, more impactful contracts, and then the ramifications of the PED need to include some sort of voiding of guarantees so that the team has some sort of control if this happens again or if this player who really needed PEDs to be a star. Because let's be honest, if he's half the player, without them, right, then Seattle doesn't want him.
Right.
They're not going to want him anymore. They're not going to want him for 6 more years.
The reward is so high, right?
That's right.
And I feel like this news, when you hear it, you're like, oh, they got another guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this one's different, though. This one's different to me because he's already paid. He's already so well paid. He's not doing this to try to get himself.
What was the motivation?
That's right. And that's where baseball needs to sit back and say, what are we doing wrong here? Because this guy should not be popped right now. This guy should have been popped 4 or 5 years ago when this contract was coming, right? We would have not tolerated it, but understood a guy like that, So there's more needs to be done. That's just where my bottom line here, and I think it has to do with the guaranteed money, and go from there.
I think as a fan of sports, I want players to be clean.
Yeah.
And I know there's supplements they can take that are legal supplements to help them. And I know leagues are trying to move forward with some things to help players cope with injuries and such. And you can understand everything's at stake where, players think, and they've done this with Olympic athletes, hey, would you, if I told you you'd die at 50, would you take this so you could win a gold medal, right? And they all say yes.
Absolutely. Almost all of them say yes.
Yes. It's
It's
mind-blowing, but they do.
So
it's the mentality
even if
of the
it's a
athlete.
competitive thing, right? Even if it's I got to be my best, right? I mean, Robinson Cano is already going to be one of the top two second basemen of all time.
How about Barry Bonds?
Of all time.
How about Barry Bonds? He was a Hall of Famer before, and all of a sudden, the home run record, right?
Yeah. Just needed the
These
spotlight.
guys are so competitive that it drives them to ignore all of that logic because they're just so driven to be competitive. And maybe it was as simple as Robinson Cano no longer being the best second baseman in Major League Baseball and not being able to live with that anymore.
I got 120 million reasons why he should be okay with it.
Right. No, I'm with you with that. All right, fascinating stuff. You could look at Robinson's contract on Spotrac.com, and don't forget to look out for the baseball trade candidates article, and be sure again to give us a review. If you listen on iTunes, leave us a review right there on iTunes. That's going to do it for this week's edition of the Spotrac.com podcast. For Spotrac.com founder Mike Giannetti and Paul Peck, I'm Kevin Sylvester. Thanks for listening.